everything that happens in the farm can lead to nutrition. So it all depends on the soil health, the seed, the fertilizer, the pesticide.
What role do you think they should be playing to transform Africa's food system?
Wow. Okay. This is a big one.
Your journey into politics. So you did your MBA?
So basically, my journey into politics is a very interesting one because, first of all, it goes back from a young age, seeing my mother, whilst growing up, my mother worked in rural development. So she did a lot of consultancy work and she managed several, foreign development aid funds. So I grew up in that space, seeing the importance of contributing to meaningful change to communities. I went through my undergrad, started up a family business, and then decided to get back to school and kind of complete and solidify my education. And I did an MBA, which specialized in supply chain. I did that in France at the European Institute of Purchasing Management. Now, the interesting thing about that MBA is that you had to find a real problem that you wanted to solve. And you had to prove that it's a real problem by getting someone from the private sector in that industry of that problem to confirm that it is a problem and to be willing to be your co-supervisor. It was quite complicated. So at the time, around 2010, 2011, in Tanzania, we had just found a lot of natural gas. Now, considering that we have had a mining sector for so long, and there had been challenges of inclusion and participation of Tanzanian businesses and Tanzanians along the supply chain and value chain of the mining sector. Now coming up with this natural gas, it's another part of the extractive sector. I thought, okay, this will be the problem that I'm going to try and address. And it links into supply chain. So I reached out to Statoil, which is a Norwegian international oil and gas company. Now it's known as Equinor, to say, hey, I want to work on this. And they said, yes, this is actually something that will be meaningful. So the head of procurement at the time, his name was Arsen at the time, became my co-supervisor. And the project, the MBA thesis project idea was endorsed by my university. Now, because it was practical hands-on, I had to do a lot of research. I had to do lots of interviews with government officials, with cabinet members, with members of parliament, civil society, private sector. 2 years down the line, I submitted my MBA thesis. It was the best in class and recommended to be a book. Then I said, okay, now I have to write this into a book, but what do I do? So I decided that I should use my book to influence change so that Tanzania has a local content policy, which was all about making sure that the local private sector and local people get opportunities along the oil and gas value chain, and managed to get support from the British High Commission at the time. Her Excellency Diana Melrose accepted to support the printing, got the private sector to support. And I managed to get the chief secretary of the government of Tanzania to write the foreword. And then I decided not to sell the book and use the book to advocate everywhere and anywhere that Tanzania needs a local content policy. Launched the book in 2014, and then 2015 we had a local content policy. So I kind of worked on it from 2010 to 2015. And along that, a lot of people were telling me that, you know what, you would make a solid member of parliament. Have you ever thought about it? And I was like, parliament? How? But then fast forward 2017, I got into politics for the first time. I vied for a national position in the ruling political party, Chama cha Mapinduzi, in the women's wing. And I remember I got to the place where I wanted to take the forms, the nomination form. And I was like, I want to vie for the position that gets me to the decision-making table, the highest decision-making table. And the person looked at me like, what? Why don't you want to start somewhere here and then build up? And I was like, no, I want to start at the highest decision-making place because I have things to do. And they're like, what? So I was very interested already at the time about nutrition. So I wanted to see our political party's women wing to also take on the issue of nutrition. And I wanted to see also the issue of nutrition being prioritized in the party's election manifesto. I managed to get in. So I did that from 2017 to 2030. And just in a nutshell, Nutrition was embedded in our 2020 election manifesto. Then I said, let me try do this from parliament side, and then got into parliament in 2020. I have about 3 months left because our parliament dissolves 27th of June. So fingers crossed, I get back to parliament, hopefully.
So you've founded so many initiatives in your time. What drove you to focus around food security and nutrition? Why did that jump out to you?
So it's quite interesting because when I was doing the MBA thesis, obviously it was focused on the oil and gas sector. But I came to realize that the low hanging fruit of Tanzanian businesses and Tanzanians to participate in the oil and gas sector was through the agriculture sector. But at the time, we were not able to produce food at the quantity and quality that the oil and gas sector was requiring. So, starting from the service provider of catering was a foreign company. They were importing even things like tomato, chicken, things like we could easily supply on our own. But the issue was meeting the quality and meeting the quantity. So that showed me that the agriculture sector is a low hanging fruit. And I had the opportunity to work at Statoil immediately after graduation. And thereafter, I worked at the Ministry of Energy and Minerals, and then later on, established the local content department under the Prime Minister's office. So at that point, I felt, okay, I should get into the agriculture sector to try and learn some more and see how can we get our produce to meet the quality, but as well as the quantity. So I joined an organization, it's a public private partnership organization called the Southern Agriculture Growth Corridor of Tanzania, SAGOT. And I was the head of policy and enabling environment there, set up the department, worked there for about 5 years. While working there, I came to a shocking realization that the southern highland regions in Tanzania that produce about 60 to 70% of our food are actually the same regions that have the highest percentage of stunting in children under 5. From a policy perspective, that was mind blowing. Like, how is that possible? How can you be producing so much food, yet children under 5 are stunted? So that triggered my interest, like, hang on, what's happening here and what can be done from a policy perspective? But then I came to realize most of the agricultural interventions, even the one that I was at, it was more focused on produce to sell, produced to meet a certain market. So you found that even households, you could find a household that had eggs or had cows, but the children wouldn't be able to eat the eggs or drink the milk. Everything would be going to the market. And I was seeing that the nutrition agenda was kind of solely being driven by the health ministry. But when it's driven by the health ministry, it's reactive because there's already a problem, so you're trying to solve it. But if you want to be proactive, you can't avoid the agriculture sector. Then I decided to be like, hang on, let me look at where I come from. I come from Kagera, which is a peripheral region. We border Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. We're by Lake Victoria. I was totally shocked to find that actually my region hosts the highest number of actual stunted children. So at the time, Tanzania's average was about 32% of children under 5 were stunted in Tanzania. This was around 2016, 2017. And Tanzania alone was hosting 8% of that 32%. More than 500,000 children under 5 were stunted. I was like, this is not possible. We have arable land, 2 rainfall season, like what's happening? So this led me in 2017, I set up the Agri Thamani Foundation. Agri for agriculture, Thamani means value. Kind of to see, can we use the agriculture sector, add value to it, and contribute towards ending malnutrition? And I managed to get the former Prime Minister, Honorable Mizengo Pinda, who's currently chair of the Agriculture Advisory Board Committee, to the President, Her Excellency, President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, to accept, one, to be the chair of Agri Thamani, but also to also be co-founder.
Wow.
It took me over 6 months to get him on board, but when you have a goal, you have to be at it and not give up. So that's what I've been doing since 2017, basically.
So you talked a little bit about some of the challenges facing Tanzania's food system. Tell me a little bit more about what you would say is the biggest challenges for Tanzania's food system.
Ever since then, though, there's been lots of transformation. I mean, the government of Tanzania, through the Minister of Agriculture, I'm sure you would agree with me, is Tanzania is one of the countries that has had a phenomenal transformation in our agriculture food systems. One of the first aspects that we tried to tackle was even issues of soil health. The government of Tanzania, in partnership with different partners and stakeholders, we managed to do soil mapping, in large parts of the country to understand what is needed in the different soils. But we even looked at the issues of inputs. This is fertilizer and seeds. We also got into having our own seeds certified so that we can reduce the dependency on imported of seeds. Because few years ago, we were depending 60 to 70% of our seeds from, being imported. So that was another very key factor that, our government worked on. But then the government of Tanzania also worked on the issue of fertilizer, because previously the way in which fertilizer was being imported was working out to be very expensive for smallholder farmers. And the government decided to introduce a bulk procurement system, which transformed the way in which access of fertilizer in the country. So that progress has been going over time, even addressing issues of storage, post harvest loss. The government set up a board that looks after rural roads, making sure that we have those last mile road set up, and that is to ease produce from farm to market. And then finally, ever since Her Excellency President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan came into office, this is in the last 4 years, the agriculture budget has tripled. So there's been lots of investment on extension officers. Extension officers now across the country have got motorbikes, have got kits to make sure that farmers can get extension services. Like it's mind blowing the kind of impact that has been done. And that goes to prove the importance of political will. And I don't know if you know, Paul, but Tanzania was one of the first countries to sign up to the Sun movement, to the
Oh,
scaling up
really?
movement.
I
Yes,
didn't know that.
one of the first countries to sign up, and
Amazing.
this was under actually our fourth president, His Excellency Dr. Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, and the chairman of Agri Thamani Foundation. He was the prime minister at the time, Honorable Mizengo Pinda, and that is why in Tanzania, in understanding that nutrition is a multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder, the coordination sits under the prime minister's office, even to date.
It's great to hear that Tanzania has been such a leader, and the role that you've played in leading that. Can you tell me a little bit about the Kampala Declaration, which has just happened in January this year? From your perspective, I believe Tanzania is a signatory. How do you feel this is going to shape the agricultural landscape in Africa going forward?
One of the things that I think was, to me, and this could be because I'm a parliamentarian, obviously I'm going to be a little biased, was that for the first time in history, in the Malabo Declaration, in the next strategy of the Malabo, parliamentarians have been recognized as a key stakeholder. Previously, that was not the case. And I personally kind of believe that was one of the missing links, because one of the key criteria of the Malabo was that every government should budget 10% of their budget to the agriculture sector. However, as I'm sure as it is in many other places, at the end of the day, it's parliamentarians who can have that oversight on the budget and who can ensure that that budget is being set. But in all the discussions, parliamentarians were never central to those discussions. So that can explain one of the delays in the process of countries meeting that 10%. And this is one of the things few years ago, I think back in 2021, when I first engaged the African Union through the relevant department. I remember the Director of Agriculture of the African Union, Dr. Godfred Bahigwa. I told him, I need your support. I want to set up the African Food Systems Parliamentary Network so that we can get parliamentarians who are keen and interested in food systems to be part of this process so that we can also contribute effectively to the transformation of the African food systems. Luckily, he endorsed the idea. Then fast forward, I had to look of other MPs who I could work with. I managed to get on board Honorable Jeremy from Congo Brazzaville and Honorable Godfred from Ghana. Three of us joined up, and 2 years ago we set up the African Food Systems Parliamentary Network. And we played a critical role in that Malabo Declaration in making sure that parliamentarians are recognized. So to me, I feel that also the declaration categorically recognized the importance of nutrition, which was also another big milestone. Because nutrition is one of those things that the impact, you can't see it with your naked eye. It's the impact that you see over time. And you may not even pinpoint it that this is as a result of nutrition, but it actually is. So I think the African Union is set to make big wins in this next Malabo phase.
So tell me a little bit more about the connection being made between nutrition, agriculture, food systems in this phase. So what practically what does that mean for how things move forward?
Basically, what this means is, so nutrition is the output, right? And everything that happens to the farm, in the farm, can lead to nutrition. So it all depends on the soil health, the seed, the fertilizer, the pesticide. What will come out of that needs to have the right nutrient content. That's number one. But then number two, how you transport it from the farm to the market. How are you going to store it? That the entire value chain can either, you can either lose the nutrition content, or you can expose the food to different types of contamination that can also have health risks. Then when you get the food to the market, how is it being stored? For example, are you going to place vegetables under the sun, and lose all the nutrient content from it? So things like that. And then eventually, how is the food being prepared? But then
How does it
finally,
taste?
yes, how does it taste? But then ultimately also is, what type of food do we put on our plate? Because one thing that I've learned, it's not about having a mountain on your plate. It's not about having lots of food. It's also about the balance. What types of food are you putting on your plate for your plate to be nutritious? And then making sure that that food is being, someone eats the food. So I think Africa has recognized the role that agriculture sector has towards achieving nutrition, which is phenomenal. But at the same time, we have also recognized that environment has a direct link to nutrition. We've recognized climate has a direct impact to nutrition. So I'm one of the people who are pushing, you cannot drive climate agenda in exclusion of nutrition. These things have to go hand in hand. Access of water also contributes to nutrition. But basic nutrition education, public awareness also contributes to nutrition. And one of the things that the Tanzanian government did recently was to create the food plate. The government of Tanzania, in partnership with FAO through the Ministry of Agriculture, started a campaign of the food plate. So you have the food plate, and it shows, what you need to put on your plate and at what quantity. And that campaign led to the food plate being put on the highest peak in Africa on Mount Kilimanjaro. And then the other thing that was done, this was like 2 years ago, and NGO was able to be a part of that, Agri Thamani, was in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture and FAO, we set up like a Msosi Asilia festival. This is traditional food festival, trying to go to the area and getting street food vendors who can produce traditional foods to try and make sure that they're not lost, because they had high nutrient content, amazing taste, etc.
What when you think about all of this great work, what has been most surprising to you in like connecting policy makers with food system transformation? What's been the thing that's been the most surprising to you?
The most surprising is, at times people tend to feel that we have food. Why are we discussing it? Like we're not in famine. Like, there is food. We are food sufficient. Many African countries will feel like we're food sufficient. Why are we talking about this? Why is this even an issue? But then you're like, yeah, we're food sufficient on the carbohydrate side. It's like the maize, the rice, the flour. It's those staple foods, right? But what about the foods that have to go with it? What about beans? What about other sources of protein? What about vegetables? What about all of that? And then the other surprising thing is, oftentimes you find that the health sector, this is across the continent, the health sector would, whenever they're looking at issues of maternity deaths, they would immediately go with, okay, it's probably the equipment, it's probably the doctors, it's probably the nurses, it's probably the midwives, but they don't look so much to the anemia issue. You're like, hang on, what about
Mm.
anemia? And then even if it's with anemia, the focus is making sure that every expecting mother who's preparing maybe to get pregnant, or a pregnant mother, a pregnant lady, should get the folic acid. And you're like, yeah, but what about the food? They can get all of this through the food that they eat. I'm sure probably in Australia it's different, but in many African countries, it's not common when you go to the doctor to actually find there's an in-house nutrition specialist who will provide that guidance of what types of food do you need to eat. And these things go hand in hand. But over time, there's been recognition of that importance. Even now in Tanzania, there's been a recognition of the importance of nutritionists. And this is something that we're also calling for, that even in our public hospitals, we should have a nutritionist in house to provide that additional support and complementary service to the medical sphere.
One question I have for you is around for other parliamentarians. What role do you think they should be playing to transform Africa's food system? What would be a message for other parliamentarians that maybe are listening?
Wow. Okay. This is a big one. But first of all, myself being a parliamentarian, I think it's very important for us as politicians to understand that nutrition directly impacts our constituents. If you have a large percentage of your constituents, God forbid, stunted, that means that even their level of decision making is going to be impacted. Their level of comprehension is going to be impacted. The way in which your opponent can just come and they can just sway them will be impacted. So you want to make sure you have a robust constituent, those who can advise you, those who can challenge you, but those who can also contribute towards development of your constituents. Number two, it's a human capital. Malnutrition has a direct impact on human capital. And
Mm.
none of us are going to be on this world forever, right? So there needs to be transition. All the efforts that we're making today, it needs to be sustainably taken forward, and more improvements need to be made. But if your human capital is questionable, there isn't going to be that sustainability. And then there's going to be a reverse on the efforts that's being made towards poverty alleviation. But food systems and even tackling nutrition through food system also creates an opportunity for jobs. It also creates an opportunity for women, for youth. Lots of women right now are getting into the business of, making locally made baby food, children food. That is an opportunity. Women can work along the value chain. That's an opportunity. More and more young people are getting into the nutrition sector. That is an opportunity. So I think as parliamentarians, as politicians, we need to understand the impact that nutrition has, but we also need to understand the opportunity that it also brings. And if we want to harness the most out of the agricultural sector, we need to take on board food systems. And I think that's why, as African parliamentarians, we set up the African Food Systems Parliamentary Network so that parliamentarians can come together, learn, and better serve. But one of my key ambitions and goals as being co-chair of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement is that under the sun we have the civil society network, we have the academia network, we have the youth network. And as co-chair, one of my goals is to make sure that under the Scaling Up Nutrition we have the sun parliamentary network, so that we could bring parliamentarians across the world who are interested in nutrition. And this is even more critical during this time where there is harsh, abrupt changes in development aid. And nutrition needs to remain central, needs to remain key, needs to remain a priority in foreign aid. And already, very recently, whilst in Paris at the Nutrition for Growth Summit, I managed to get the European Union Parliament Development Committee, under the chair, MEP Barry, to endorse this idea, as well as UK parliamentarians under the all-party parliamentary group on nutrition for development. So I'm pretty excited, and I hope, Paul, you and the SDG2 Advocacy Hub are also going to be on board on making sure that we get that set up.
We'll definitely be on board, and it's exciting to hear about that. And hopefully, that group's meeting before the Sun Global Gathering later this year. So let's see if maybe there can be a formal meeting there.
That's the ambitious target. Let's see how we do.
I think with you driving it, you're going to make it happen. So I'm excited. Well, I'd like to close things off with a recurring question we can all relate to. So I'd love to know what's something that you really enjoy eating. What's something that you love to eat at the moment and that you're really enjoying? One of your favorite foods, maybe something nutritious that you enjoy.
I'm gonna pick a traditional food,
Yeah,
and hopefully, as chef and the driver of Chef Manifesto, maybe you can try cook it.
I can
So
try.
where I come from in Kagera, we eat a lot of bananas, but this is cooked bananas. And our banana, it's the area that I'm from is called Bukoba. It's so famous that banana in Kiswahili means ndizi. It's so famous that when you go to the market, you need to ask for ndizi za Bukoba because they're bananas, different parts of the country, but you want the bananas to come from my place. They're the best bananas, hands down. So what we do is we take the bananas and we put in banana leaf in the pot, and then inside we put bananas. Peel them, cut them through. Then we put beans. Then we put fish. Then
Amazing.
we put vegetables, and then we put other lots of sauces and stuff like that. And then we cover the banana leaf. We put it on the cooker, and then the cover we don't use like a pot cover. We take another pot, cover it on top, and then it boils. And then when it reaches a certain stage, you also add some peanut puree in there,
Okay.
stir it up, and then that's my favorite dish. So when it's
Sounds
done,
amazing.
I'm telling you, it is delicious. That's my favorite
I'll,
dish.
I'll have to try cooking it. Well,
Yeah, when you come
or
to Tanzania, you have to
I'll
make
come to Tanzania. We can
yes,
make it. Yeah, we
yes.
can maybe cook it together. That would be great. Well, thank you, Honourable Neema. It's a pleasure to chat with you. I so appreciate the work that you're doing and your ambition, I guess, for really driving forward food systems and nutrition in Tanzania. I'm excited about the year to come. Excited about the potential of the Kampala Declaration and also your work with Sun and the Parliamentarian Network. So continue the great work. But thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. I'm your huge fan, so this to me is a dream. So thank you so much.
That's so great. Well, thank you.